My stepmother kicked me out of the house, but after 10 years I found out that the house belonged to me and kicked them all out. You never forget the day your life turns upside down. For me, that day started with the sound of a suitcase zipper. I was 19. Fresh out of high school, not much to my name, but I had dreams. College applications were in, my part-time job was enough to pay for gas and snacks, and the house, well, I thought it was mine in a way. Not legally, not yet. But it was where I grew up. The walls had my posters, the floors carried the echoes of my childhood, and the tree out front held the tire swing I built with my dad before everything got complicated. Then came her. Her name was Claudia. My father met her during a business trip. Within 6 months, they were married. She moved in with her 2 daughters, and overnight, I became the odd one out in my own home. The laughter I used to hear in the hallway after dinner? Replaced by whispers behind closed doors. My seat at the dinner table got shifted farther away. Eventually, I started skipping dinner altogether. It didn't happen all at once, but by the time my father started introducing her as the head of the house, I knew the tides had turned. Still, I hung on. I told myself, it's just a phase. Families go through changes, right? One morning, Claudia called me into the living room. She was sitting in my dad's old armchair, her manicured fingers tapping against a mug that said "World's Best Mom," a mug I didn't buy her. "We need to talk," she said without looking up. I sat on the edge of the couch, suddenly feeling like a visitor in my own home. "You're an adult now," she began, crossing her legs and sighing as if this conversation exhausted her before it even started. "You've had a good run here, but it's time you start finding your own path." I stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, drawing out each word like a verdict, "you can't live here anymore. We need the space." "The space? For what?" "For my girls," she said, as if that explained everything. "They're getting older, they need rooms of their own. Privacy. Stability. You understand, don't you?" I wanted to ask where my father was, why he wasn't here telling me this himself. But deep down, I already knew. He hadn't been the same since Claudia moved in. His voice got quieter when she was around. His decisions came secondhand through her lips. "You can't just kick me out," I said, my voice thinner than I'd hoped. "You'll land on your feet. Kids these days are resourceful. Besides, we've let you stay here long enough." "Let me stay?" I said. "This is my home." "No, it's your father's. And now it's ours." She stood up, walked over, and handed me a manila envelope. I opened it with shaky hands. Inside was a printed list of local job fairs and apartment listings circled in red pen. "You have 1 month," she said. "After that, the locks change." I didn't cry. Not then. I packed what I could carry, left the rest in the garage, and moved in with a friend from work. My dad never called. Not even once. The next 10 years were rough, not gonna lie. I bounced between couchsurfing and working back-to-back jobs. Got my degree through night classes. Every time I thought I might finally catch a break, something knocked me back down: an eviction, a missed payment, an unexpected layoff. But I kept going. Stubbornness is a powerful fuel. During those years, I avoided that part of town like the plague. I didn't want to see the house. I didn't want to know who was living in my old room or if Claudia had torn down my childhood drawings taped to the basement wall. I let that part of my life become a ghost town in my memory, abandoned but not forgotten. And then, the universe did what it does best: it threw me a curveball when I least expected it. I was 30. Working at a local law office as a clerk, thanks to a friend who vouched for me. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I'd finally saved up enough to maybe, just maybe, put down roots somewhere. One afternoon, my boss, Mr. Calderon, asked me to organize some files for a real estate case. Just routine stuff. I was flipping through tax records and deeds when I saw a familiar address printed on one of the folders. My childhood address. My hand froze. I double-checked the name on the document: mine. Not Claudia's. Not my father's. Mine. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Some fluke. Maybe the names got mixed up. But the more I read, the more it made sense and made me furious. 10 years earlier, right before my mother passed away, she had placed the house in a trust. My trust. My name was on the deed. It had been there all along. Apparently, my father never changed it, either out of negligence or some scrap of guilt. Claudia had no legal claim to the house. She'd been living there all this time, rent-free, on my property. And she kicked me out. I closed the file and sat there in shock. The hum of the fluorescent lights in the office suddenly felt like it was mocking me. 10 years. 10 years I spent scraping by, thinking I had nothing, when all along, I owned the very roof they were sleeping under. Mr. Calderon noticed my expression. "You okay?" I told him everything. He nodded slowly, then said something that stuck with me: "You have the right to take it back. The question is, do you want to?" That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of my apartment, thinking about all the sacrifices I'd made. The birthdays missed. The rent I could barely cover. The jobs I'd lost while they lived in comfort in a house I could only dream about. Yes. I wanted it back. And I was going to get it. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Calderon's office with a plan. "I want to pursue legal action," I told him, planting the deed on his desk. "I want them out." He glanced at the file, nodded once, then leaned back in his chair. "It's your right," he said. "But be ready, family disputes like this? They don't come without a storm." I'd already lived through the storm. This time, I was walking into it with lightning in my pocket. We drafted the paperwork that afternoon. The house was legally mine, confirmed by every clause and stamp on the original trust. Claudia had been living there under false pretenses. My father? He must have known, or at least suspected. Either way, ignorance wasn't a shield in this case. The next step was serving the notice. I decided to do it in person. Call it petty. Call it closure. But after 10 years of silence, I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized the game was over. It was a clear Saturday when I pulled up to the house. Funny how small it looked now. When I was a kid, it felt like a castle. Now, it was just a weathered two-story with faded shutters and overgrown hedges. The front porch had a crack down the middle, and the mailbox was still the one I painted with stars when I was 12. I took a breath, walked up to the door, and rang the bell. It took a minute, but then there she was, Claudia. Older now. Still dressed like she stepped out of a catalog, but there was a weariness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She opened the door halfway. "Can I help?" Why? Her voice caught mid-sentence. "It's me," I said. "I'm here for the house." She blinked. "Excuse me?" I handed her the envelope. "This is a formal eviction notice. The house is mine. It has been since the day you kicked me out." Her expression twisted. "What kind of joke is this?" "No joke. The deed was never transferred. My mother put it in a trust under my name. You've been living here illegally for a decade." She scoffed. "Your father doesn't own this house," I cut in. "Never did after the divorce. And even if he thought he did, he had no authority to let you kick me out." She went pale. "This is absurd. You think you can just waltz back in and claim everything?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." A girl's voice called from inside. One of her daughters. "Mom? Who's at the door?" Claudia turned halfway toward the hallway but said nothing. "You have 30 days, I told her. Then I want you and everyone else out. No exceptions." "I could fight this," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "You don't know what you're stepping into." "Oh, I do," I replied. "And I've been stepping through worse things for 10 years. I walked back to my car before she could say another word. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked in the rearview mirror. Claudia was still standing in the doorway, the envelope limp in her hands, like she couldn't decide whether to scream or faint. Over the next few days, I heard from her lawyer. He tried to sound tough, but it was all bluster. When I sent over the trust documents, the deed, and the signed records, the tune changed. There was no wiggle room. No loophole. She had no case. A week later, I got a call from my father. It was the first time we'd spoken in nearly a decade. "You really going through with this?" he asked. "You knew the house wasn't yours," I said. "Why didn't you stop her?" There was a long pause on the other end. "I thought you'd be fine," he said, finally. "You were always tougher than you looked." That's one way to put it. Another would be, "You abandoned your son." "I didn't abandon you," he said, defensive now. "You could have reached out. You just left." "I didn't leave," I snapped. "I was kicked out. Remember?" He went quiet again. "I'm not doing this to get back at you," I said, my voice lower now. "I'm doing this because it's mine. And because I earned it more times than I should have had to." "She's not taking it well," he said. "She didn't take it well when she kicked me out either." I didn't hear any sympathy then. I'm not saying you're wrong, he said, quieter. But you're burning a bridge. I laughed dryly. It was never a bridge. It was a plank. And you all watched me walk off it. On the 31st day, I returned. This time, the house was quiet. The lawn was freshly mowed. The porch light was off. There were 3 garbage bags stacked neatly by the curb and a U-Haul parked out front. Claudia was standing by the truck, arms crossed. Her daughters were already inside, their faces unreadable through the tinted window. I didn't say anything. She handed me a key. Hope you're happy, she said. I'm not, I replied honestly. But I'm done being quiet. She looked like she wanted to say something more. Maybe an insult. Maybe a plea. But in the end, she just climbed into the truck and drove off. And just like that, she was gone. I stood on the front steps for a long time before unlocking the door. The house smelled different. The paint was new in some places, old in others. My posters were gone, of course. The tire swing was missing. But I was home. Home. And now the story truly begins. You ever walk into a room that used to belong to you and not recognize anything? That's what it felt like stepping back into the house. The walls were painted beige, like someone had tried to scrub out every hint of personality. The furniture was stiff and uncomfortable, definitely not mine. A stack of magazines sat untouched on the coffee table. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a model house. Staged. Hollow. I stood in the center of the living room for a long time, just breathing. It wasn't until I climbed up to my old bedroom that the memories hit me like a freight train. Same creaky floorboard by the door. Same window with the view of the maple tree where I used to hide comic books. Same closet that once held my life's ambitions, trophies, notebooks, and childhood dreams folded up like old sweaters. Only now it was filled with suitcases that didn't belong to me. It took a week to sort through the leftover belongings. Claudia hadn't taken much. Maybe she didn't want reminders. Or maybe she thought I'd throw it all out in a fit of revenge. I didn't. I boxed everything neatly and left it in the garage with a note, "You have until Friday to pick this up." She never came. Cleaning out the house became therapeutic. Every scrub, every dusting pass felt like reclaiming a piece of my past. I repainted the walls, took down the plastic curtains she'd installed, and opened the windows for the first time in years. I let the breeze remind the place of who it used to belong to. Funny how silence can be so loud when you're healing. There were still questions buzzing in my head. Why did my dad let it happen? Why didn't I check the deed earlier? Why did I let 10 years go by before doing anything about it? But every time I started spiraling, I reminded myself I'm not that 19-year-old anymore. I don't have to ask for permission to take up space. Not here. Not anywhere. And with that clarity came something else, purpose. I didn't just want to live in the house. I wanted to transform it. Make it into something new. Something mine. That's when the idea hit me, what if I turned it into a space for people like me? People who had been tossed aside, kicked out, or forgotten? Not a shelter. Not a charity. A place where people could reset. Learn how to rebuild their lives. A quiet place to land and then launch again. I spent weeks researching transitional housing programs. I reached out to nonprofit organizations, architects, and former mentors. I told them my story, every gritty, uneven part of it, and asked for their help. To my surprise, they listened. One of them, a woman named Darla who ran a community outreach center, said something that stuck with me: "You have no idea how powerful it is to turn your trauma into someone else's safe space." So that's what I set out to do. I called it the Second Step House. The renovations were gradual. I used my savings, applied for grants, and poured every hour I wasn't working into fixing the place up. One room became an office. Another, a shared kitchen and dining area. The garage? A workshop for job training programs. People started calling it the house that healed. They didn't even know the half of it. Word got around town. A local journalist came by to write a piece about it. I told her the whole story, yes, even the part about being kicked out. I wasn't ashamed anymore. That chapter made the rest of the book possible. Not long after the article ran, my father showed up again. I was in the front yard, planting some new shrubs with one of our volunteers. I looked up and there he was, leaning against the fence like he used to on Sunday mornings. "You're really doing something with this place," he said. I wiped sweat off my forehead. "Yeah. I am. He watched me for a while. I saw the article. I nodded. Did Claudia? She did. And? She's not happy. I let that hang in the air. Neither was I. For 10 years. He stuffed his hands in his pockets. You've made something good out of it. That's more than most people can say. I looked at him closely. His hair was thinner now. Wrinkles around his eyes deeper than I remembered. I don't need your approval, I said. But I appreciate the honesty. I didn't come for approval, he said. I came because I owe you an apology. That stopped me cold. For what? I asked. For not being a father when it counted, he said. For choosing convenience over courage. I let Claudia do things I should have stopped. I told myself it was temporary. That you'd understand. That you'd bounce back. But I wasn't there when it mattered. I didn't say anything. He looked down. You don't have to forgive me. I haven't decided yet, I said. But I'll think about it. And I meant it. He nodded, turned to leave, then paused. Your mom would be proud. I watched him walk away. Maybe she would be. I hoped so. It's been almost a year since I moved back in. The second step house is running strong. We've helped 15 people so far. Some found jobs. Some reconnected with their families. One guy started his own painting business using the skills he learned here. As for me? I've never felt more grounded. More whole. I sleep in the same bedroom I used to dream in as a kid, but now those dreams are bigger. And I'm not afraid of losing them anymore. Funny how it all started with a manila envelope 10 years too late. Funny how healing begins in the same place hurt started. I didn't expect the city council to care. When I submitted the proposal to officially designate the Second Step House as a non-profit community organization, I thought it'd get buried under paperwork. But 2 weeks later, I got an email asking me to speak at the next public meeting. Tell them why you started it, Darla told me. Not the polished version. The real one. So I did. I stood in front of a half-circle of officials under bright fluorescent lights and told them the truth. About being kicked out of my home by someone who had no right. About spending a decade learning what it meant to survive. About the moment I found my name on a deed and realized that sometimes justice doesn't come as a thunderclap, it comes as a quiet page in a dusty file. I told them how the house wasn't just wood and concrete. It was a second chance. And how I wanted others to feel what I felt when I finally walked back through that door: dignity, agency, hope. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone started clapping. A week later, the approval came through. We were official. On the morning of our ribbon-cutting ceremony, the house felt different. Brighter, somehow. There were balloons on the mailbox, folding chairs on the lawn, a table full of homemade cupcakes, and a line of neighbors stretching down the sidewalk. People I didn't know walked up to me with tears in their eyes. You gave my cousin a room here last month, one woman said. He hasn't used in 3 weeks. You helped my brother find a job, another said. He smiles again. That day, I didn't feel like the kid who got kicked out. I felt like the man who took the key back and opened the door for others. I gave a speech, nothing fancy. Just a few words about what the house meant, how it used to be mine, and now it was everyone's. How every broken thing inside these walls had been repaired, by hand, with intention. Afterward, a little boy wandered into the yard and pointed at the tree. Did someone really hang a swing there once? He asked. I smiled. Yeah, I said. I did. A month later, I got a letter. It was from Claudia. It wasn't long. Just a folded piece of paper with a few carefully chosen words. I saw the article. I drove by the house once. I didn't stop. I didn't know it still looked like that. I've thought about writing for months, maybe longer. I know it won't make things right, but I want you to know something. I thought I was doing what was best for my family. I convinced myself you were just a phase your father needed to move past. That was cruel. I know that now. I'm sorry. I read it 3 times, then tucked it into the back of my drawer. Forgiveness is a strange thing. It doesn't always come all at once. Sometimes it arrives slowly, like a sunrise through fog. And maybe one day, I'll write her back. These days, I sit on the porch most evenings with a cup of tea and a notebook. There's always someone around, a resident working on a resume, a volunteer painting a hallway, a social worker chatting in the kitchen. The house is full of life again. The rooms have names now. The big front bedroom is called the restart room. The kitchen? The table. Because it's where people meet, share, and start feeling like humans again. One of our residents, a young woman named Tasha, said something to me last week that stuck. You made a place where people don't feel like burdens. That hit me deep. Because I remember what it felt like to be a burden. Or at least to believe I was one. Now, every chipped plate I wash, every floor I mop, every coat of paint I brush, it's all part of rewriting that belief, for others and for myself. One evening, I stood by the window in my old room, now an office, and looked out at the street. The maple tree had grown tall, its leaves rustling gently in the wind. A new swing hung from its branch. A resident's kid had tied it up last week. The kid came out with his dad and ran toward it, laughing. I heard the creak of the rope, the joyous squeal as he launched forward, feet in the air. That sound, the same one I used to make wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket. This house? It's not about revenge. It's about return. It's about learning that the worst day of your life doesn't get the final say. That being thrown out doesn't mean you stay gone. That sometimes, the house that breaks you can also be the house that heals you if you're the one holding the keys. And now, I am. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.